After a decade of YouTubing, I think it's finally time for a little bit of a heart-to-heart, because I've never really explained exactly what my living situation is like. A lot of you know that I film a lot of videos in my driveway or on the road around my property, etc. But what exactly is going on here, and how does that impact my take on vehicles like this new Rivian right next to me? This is the Rivian that we bought, but I'm not entirely clear whether I'm going to keep the Rivian or keep the Lightning or just get rid of both of them, to be honest, because of my particular situation. I think that my location and my lifestyle, I guess you'd say, gives me a different perspective than some folks on the automotive industry in general. I live out in Santa Cruz County, which is a rural county in California. I don't live in Santa Cruz itself, it's quite a bit that way. I live in the middle of a redwood forest. I have 13 acres here. My nearest neighbor is that way. It's about half a mile, actually about a mile really, over to my nearest neighbor there. And my nearest neighbor owns about 200 acres in that direction, so not a lot of folks are around. You might wonder, what do we do with 13 acres? Well, most of it is simply covered in redwood trees. A lot of the lots up here are zoned for timber production, although we don't intend to harvest any of our redwood trees. We do have some long-term plans for maybe about 5 acres of orchard at some point on the property down to the lower part of the property, but the vast majority of it is simply country living and all the random things that go along with it, which is why I was so interested in an electric pickup truck like the Rivian. I live off-grid for a combination of reasons. One of them is environmental reasons. The other one is general power reliability, winter and summer out here in the middle of nowhere. So I chose to go 100% off-grid. Right now the sun is shining, power is being made. Theoretically, I could slowly charge this Rivian, but for a lot of the year when the sun is not shining, or maybe I need to tow something, charging something like the Rivian could be a little on the tricky side based on the amount of power that I have. For me, at least, there is no typical weekend. My weekend might include some fire clearing or road clearing because a tree fell, which may involve the use of this chipper, which is about 6,000 pounds in terms of curb weight. It has a 4-cylinder Cummins diesel under the hood here. It's a pretty big chipper. It'll do about 12-inch logs in the back. Now, this thing occasionally might need to go in for service, so this may have to go up and down the hill, or we might have to call a remote service person out, but you never know where you might need to move it. There's also a 26-foot flatbed trailer for whatever I might need to move. You never know when you might need 10,000 pounds of concrete or lumber, or you might need to move a vehicle around, perhaps move a tractor around. Occasionally my Jeep may need to get rescued because sometimes it does get stuck out there on the property. It spends most of its time as basically an overglorified tractor, using it to haul things, pull things up the hill when you don't need to worry about the vehicle getting damaged. You can see there is definitely a lot of body damage over there on the side, and it spends most of its time with a sprayer reel on the back and a 60-gallon spray tank in the back, and as you can see, it has no interior. When you're chipping small things, there's a small chipper around. There's also a 120-gallon gas tank trailer that you might need to tow around to buy gas for things like the side-by-side, or if you run your regular car out of gas. Pretty much everything has been towed by the Durango that we've talked about for some time here on the channel, simply because it's a convenient size to handle all the trailers, including the box trailer that I have, and it can park tight and turn tight, which is the big thing that I like about the Durango. And that's one of the big reasons that I really wanted the Rivian, because the Rivian is a mid-sized truck with a high tow rating, and it does have a really tight turning radius. But if you want to know how this tows, that's going to be in a different video. The other thing I don't talk about too often is that we are avid DIYers, so everything that is the house, the foundation, etc., the framing, the roofing, everything we did ourselves. We literally built our own house, and everything that is the house came in, on, or towed by an SUV. And yep, sadly, that even meant excavating the foundation out of the bedrock by hand. And that by hand thing includes excavating the basement by hand. One of these days we really ought to have concrete poured down here, but as you can see, everything goes into the wheelbarrow and then gets wheeled out of the basement. Now it's time for a little side-by-side show and tell, which has a ton of random things in the back because we're still working on a project that I'm going to show you. And one of these days, maybe I will give this Kawasaki Mule a review. First stop, the water hydrant project. Last year we installed a whole bunch of new water hydrants. We decided to move the water tank that services the house, install another water hydrant, and 45,000 gallons of water storage, because if you haven't seen on the news, California is frequently on fire, and we wanted to make sure we could do something about that. So this weekend's project is connecting up the last 4 of these tanks. You can see lots of connections going on here. There are 9 of these 5,000 gallon tanks total. Also in the random toolbox is this Case 570 XLT. This is just a bit too heavy for me to haul. If it needs to go in for service, I can use my trailer. However, someone with a Class A license actually has to take this in because the combination of trailer and tractor is well over 10,000 pounds. There's some of the vegetable garden right there over the abyss. It's about an acre of vegetable garden. And then off to see the rest. Down here we have the final stage in our wastewater treatment facility. We treat all of our own black water and gray water and then recycle it into the garden. So in this last phase, it's aerated, then it's ozonated with some ozone generators over there on that side, filtered and then plumbed back through the garden via the purple pipe system. And that also waters this native tree orchard that we have planted here in this open area of the property. These are all native maple and oak trees, and then a few Christmas trees for later. On this side, we have a 600 square foot deck in the redwood trees because, hey, why not? Over there on that side, it's about 40 feet from the bottom of that deck all the way down there to ground level. There's a bridge over there to the ground. And then over here on this side, this might be a root cellar at some day. Right now, it's just a big pit in the ground. In the middle of everything, we find the heart of the OffGrid system. This is where we find the battery bank right here under this lid. And then in this shed, we find all of the inverters for the system. This project took a few months because, as you guessed it, we did all the work ourselves. I did all the wiring for the inverter units myself. We even poured the concrete floor ourselves, built the shed, etc. Everything that's going on here is definitely a little bit kooky and specific to our situation. So over here, this is what converts the power from the generator to 48 volt DC to charge the battery pack if needed. 2 solar charge controllers right over there pulling power in from the solar panels. Then a twin or a triple inverter bank there, I should say. Peak capacity on these is about 36 kW. I get a lot of questions about batteries. I deliberately went with lead acid batteries. This is approximately a 200 kilowatt hour battery bank. You can see all the batteries right in there. Each of these batteries weighs about 650 pounds or so. The reason I went with lead acid batteries is twofold. The first one is recyclability and recycled content currently. These batteries are already over 90% post-consumer content recycled material. And lead acid batteries are completely recyclable by the technology that we have now. So at the end of these batteries' life, they can go right on to another life. Anyway, back to the batteries. If you live in suburbia, get a lithium-ion battery pack. They're going to be a lot easier to deal with. Obviously, there is a ton of room here for this battery bank, and if this was a lithium battery pack, it would be maybe 1/10 the size, so it'd be a lot easier to deal with, it'd be a lot lighter. But these batteries, again, are more recycled, they are more recyclable in the future, they were a little bit less expensive, and they're a little bit easier to DIY also. And then let's continue down the hill yet further. And down here we have a 15 kilowatt array. It's actually split into two arrays, one over here on this side, one over there on that side. Because I live off-grid, it makes the most sense for the power to not all be produced at the same time. So right now at this time of the day, this large array right here is producing about 6,000 watts of true output. The rated capacity of the array is 15 kW. True capacities are around 12 or so. You'll never get exactly what they rate it for. Over here on this side, this array starts producing right around this time of day, and then it will continue producing on into the afternoon. So the one over here, it starts in the morning right around 10 a.m. this time of year, maybe 9 a.m. it will start producing power. They're both really kind of cranking along right now. You can see the sun just up there. And then later in the day, that one will take over until it gets shaded by the rest of the forest right around there. We chose this particular location because thankfully, our next door neighbor right there across the way down this hill, they have quite a large solar array, so they keep a lot of their trees trimmed so that way they can get power as well. And in case you're wondering, yep, the trees are pretty darn tall around here. This particular tree is not the tallest redwood tree, but it is about 250 feet tall in its own right. And lastly, down here at the bottom, about half a mile from those water tanks, we have the well. This is approximately a 350-foot deep well, and yes, you guessed it, we dropped the pump in there ourselves. We didn't dig the well though, that would definitely have been a step too far, but we did put the pump in ourselves, and it definitely has a long way to pump. And there we go, that is the craziness that happens out here in the forest where I film all of my videos, and why occasionally in some videos you'll see some really strange things happening in the background, like right next to me there's a bucket for my excavator, because, I don't know, somehow it's living there in the driveway at the moment. At any rate, that's what happens here in rural California. I definitely see some synergies. I know a lot of folks out there are like, oh my goodness, everybody in California is a particular kind of thing. Not everybody in California lives in Los Angeles. Not everybody lives in the Bay Area, although I do work in the Bay Area. So the Alex that Alex and Autos is in, where my editor is, where my videographer is, etc., that's in San Jose, California, the third largest city in California. So definitely a lot of interaction with Bay Area people. But I do not live in the Bay Area. I actually live in a strange slice of rural America that's a little bit different than, of course, Midwestern rural America. It is distinct to this particular area right across that way. I can sort of see the ocean in the distance. I think a realtor would probably call this ocean view property. I probably would not, however. But anyway, that's my crazy life, and that is the take that I put on a lot of vehicles. You know, I do live down here, down a gravel road, where something like this Rivian is intended. But to be perfectly honest, the reality for most of rural America is you would be just fine with a wide variety of different vehicles. Even a two-wheel drive truck is theoretically totally possible out here. I actually know a decent number of neighbors with trucks that have the two-wheel drive truck because they're simply concerned about fuel economy, and it's just fine even out here in rural America. Anyway, comment down there in the comment section below. Let me know if you want me to cover additional topics. I am planning on some solar-powered EV videos, things like that, over on the EV Buyer's Guide channel, because I know a lot of folks have questions about that, especially about off-grid living with an electric vehicle like this. It is pretty tricky, which is why I do not have an EV as my daily driver for myself. That is the Dodge Durango. We do have the EV6 at the moment, but it charges most of the time at the office. I can't really charge it here at home. Anyway, again, sound off down there in the comment section, and I'll see all of you later. Be sure and check out the towing video on this Rivian coming up soon.